Not too long ago, I walked into a 6th grade classroom to coach up a teacher. So I'm walking into the back of the room with all the kids, and the teacher is standing there at the front of the room, just like this, but she's holding a banana up in the air, like just like this, like real obvious, like she just wants all the kids to see it. So let's just acknowledge that this is already a super risky move in a 6th grade classroom, okay? She's holding up this banana, and of course, the kids are pouring into the class, and what are they all asking? Yeah, exactly. Why are you holding the banana? Miss, what's with the banana? And she's not answering any of their questions. She's just standing there silently, which you can imagine only increases their fury. So more kids are pouring in, and I take my spot in the back of the room. I'm like, okay, I got to see where she's going here. More kids like, Miss, what are you doing with the banana? Why are you holding that banana? She's not answering any of our questions. And the room's getting louder and louder and louder. And eventually the bell rings. And when the bell rings, this teacher speaks her first words. She looks at the banana. She looks at the kids, and she says, everyone quiet down. How fast do you think you could eat this entire banana? And the room erupts, right? Okay, kids are throwing out times, and because every kid just has to be heard, a bunch of them are just like, I don't even like bananas, right? And they're just going back and forth. And so she says, okay, quiet down, let me ask it this way. She said, show of hands, how many of you think you could eat this entire banana in 60 seconds or less? Bunch of hands go up. And she starts to whittle it down. 50 seconds, 40 seconds, 30 seconds. Hands are dropping, and to nobody's surprise, she gets down to 2 boys in this 6th grade classroom who are arguing about how fast they can eat this banana. And at one point, one of these boys says, Miss, I can eat that banana in 7 seconds. And she looks at this kid and says, you can eat this entire banana in 7 seconds. Kid says yes. I look at everyone in the classroom, and I can tell they're thinking what I'm thinking, which is, please God, let this kid try to eat this banana in 7 seconds, right? And so she says, okay, everyone give him a round of applause, welcome him to the front of the room. Everyone claps, she steps aside, hands him the banana, and pulls out her phone. And she says, here's how this is gonna go. I'm gonna say, on your mark, get set, go. You got 7 seconds to eat that entire banana. Kids are standing up around the room. Quite frankly, I'm standing up. I'm pulling out my phone. I'm like, there's a 100% chance I'm getting this on video. She says, on your mark, and the kid starts to peel the banana. And when the kid starts to peel the banana, she looks at him and she's like, well, what are you doing? He goes, I'm peeling this banana, so when you say go, I'm ready to eat it. And she looks at him and says, that's not what I asked. She said, I asked, how fast can you eat that entire banana? And all the kids in the class start to have the realization you're having right now. She means the entire banana, the whole thing. So this kid starts to freak out. He's like, no, that's not what you said. And now, of course, all the other kids have been paying abundant attention. They're like, yep, that's what she said. We all heard it, you know. And he's like, no, I got to peel it first. Then I could eat it in 7 seconds. She says, okay, peel it first, then you could eat it in 7 seconds. Kid says yes. She says, okay, so you're telling me the order in which you do this matters. Kid says yes. She looks at the class and she says, so we can all agree order matters. And that's how she started her lesson on order of operations that day. That's a hell of a teacher, right? I mean, think how most of you learned order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Somewhere there's a math teacher in this room like, dude, I'm still using that. Like, please, I see you. So also, like PEMDAS. What's the P in PEMDAS stand for? Anyone remember? Yeah, parentheses. Also, in a parentheses is kind of shaped like what kind of fruit? A banana, which she revisited later. Now, I want you to think about how she started that lesson and how that's different from if she had just walked to the front of the room and said, good morning, class. Today we're going to talk about order of operations. Those two starts are profoundly different. One of them is inherently boring, and one of them is inherently engaging. My friends, we have to talk about engagement. We have an engagement crisis in America's schools. Now, when we talk about engagement, too often people use the word engagement and fun as though they are synonyms. They are not the same. When I'm talking about engagement, I'm not talking about fun. We aren't in the business of edutainment. When I say engagement, I'm talking about curiosity, participation, and the desire to persevere. If those 3 things are present, we know kids are engaged. Now, let's talk more about engagement. In order to do that, I want to ask you what a few of these songs have in common. What about this one right here? What is Adele's song, Rolling in the Deep? What does Prince's song, When Doves Cry? What does Hotel California by the Eagles? What is Bob Marley's No Woman, No Cry? What does Aretha Franklin's Respect? And what does Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit have in common? So I want you to think about it. So I'll tell you this. I did this last week in D.C., and there was a young lady in the front who was like, they're all old. And that makes me want to die inside. So I'll tell you this. Not long ago, Rolling Stone magazine did a really interesting survey. They were trying to identify the most recognizable, most beloved, and most iconic songs of all time. You should know that all 6 of the songs that I just showed you are on that list of the top 500 most recognizable, most beloved, and most iconic songs of all time. Now, I'm not super interested in in that list. I'm really interested in what happened after Rolling Stone put out that list. Because after Rolling Stone put out that list, researchers did this really interesting study, and they asked a question. They said, is there a formula to writing a hit song? And guess what they discovered? There is. They discovered that almost every single song on that list follows this exact format. The song begins with an intro, the first verse, the chorus, the second verse, the chorus comes around again, the song will take us to the bridge, the chorus comes around a third time, and then the song ends. Every single one. Furthermore, researchers also discovered that almost every single song has an average tempo of around 120 beats per minute, has about 500 beats per song, and only between 6 and 8 chord changes. Why do I share this information with you? Because if we're going to talk about engagement, let's talk about the places where we seek out engagement. It's in the music we listen to, the movies and TV we watch, the jokes and the stories that we're told. And I need you to understand, everyone put eyes on me, that engagement is formulaic. Take a look at these movies right here. Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Spider-Man, Star Wars, The Matrix. Think about what all of these movies have in common. There's a bunch of things. They're a series. They were all blockbusters. Somebody somewhere in the room is just like, they're all for nerds. Yes, they are. I love, all of these are great movies. Show of hands if you're familiar with the hero's journey. Every single one of these movies follows the hero's journey. If you're not familiar with the hero's journey, here it is. Every single one of these movies begins with a call to action. Then there's a moment where a hero crosses the threshold. There's an opportunity for then the mentor to teach the lead. Think about a movie like Star Wars. Who's the mentor? Obi-Wan, thank you. And nerds identified. Yes, let's unite. Good. Then Obi-Wan dies, and who becomes the mentor? Yoda, right? Because we still have to follow. Think about Harry Potter. Who's the mentor in Harry Potter? Dumbledore, bingo. A mentor teaches the lead, then there will be a temptation, a dark moment, a final conflict, and then a moment where our hero returns home. Hear me clearly. Every single one of the movies that you just saw follows this exact formula. Why is this important for us? Because I need us to understand that engagement is formulaic. Show of hands if you are familiar with Freytag's pyramid. Anyone? Handful of people. Show of hands if you have seen a Disney movie before. Then you are abundantly familiar with Freytag's pyramid. Let's start with this one. I'll tell you what, The Lion King. So every Disney movie starts with exposition. Spoiler alert's coming, just for the record. So think about the exposition. An exposition is just explanation. So what is happening right here? Mufasa is explaining to Simba, everything the light touches will be yours one day. Also, don't go over there. And then what does Simba promptly do? He goes over there, which leads us to the inciting incident, which is the stampede. Yes, it's very sad. The artist is about to stop drawing one of these characters. It's devastating. It's devastating, right? So what happens in the inciting incident? Mufasa is about to be killed, which then leads to a rising action. Hakuna Matata, everything's totally fine. Simba's just going to leave the Pride Land. He and Timon and Pumbaa are going to go live happily ever after, but we know that's not how this movie is going to end. This is leading to a climax. What is the climactic moment in The Lion King? It's the final face-off between Simba and Scar, and then I'm about to blow your mind. Then there's a falling action. They don't even hide it. What happens to Scar at the end of The Lion King? He falls. You ready? Anyone seen Beauty and the Beast? What happens to Gaston at the end of Beauty and the Beast? He falls. Mother Gothel, Entangled. What happens to her at the end of that movie? She falls. Some of you are like, well, that's a new development. Go all the way back to Snow White. What happens to the witch at the end of Snow White? She falls. There is a falling action, and then there is a resolution. And the circle of life continues. Every Disney movie you have ever seen follows Freytag's pyramid. I need you to understand that engagement is formulaic. Anyone been on a flight recently? Oh, it sucks. It sucks so bad. I'll tell you this. There's one good thing about modern air travel, and that is this, in-flight Wi-Fi. Especially for a person like me, I typically travel every week. So I'll tell you this, the one good thing about, I had to be on a flight from Los Angeles to New York a while back. That's about a 5.5, 6 hour flight. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to hop on the Wi-Fi. I'm going to get a bunch of work done, respond to all that email. We get to a cruising altitude. I open up my laptop. Guess what I discover? Wi-Fi's down. Great. Now, if you're ever on a flight and the Wi-Fi's down, it operates very similarly to your Wi-Fi at home. 9 times out of 10, all you got to do is reset it from the front of the plane, turn it off, turn it back on, it'll reboot. I know this because I fly all the time. So I press my call button, flight attendant comes back, and I need you to know as nice as humanly possible. And I said, hey, the Wi-Fi's down. When you get a moment, there's no hurry. Would you mind just trying to restart it from the front of the plane? Flight attendant looks at me and says, pretend like it's the olden days, turns my call button off, and walks away. So I lit up a cigarette. All right. And she comes running to the back of the plane, and she says to me, sir, that is illegal. And I said, pretend like it's not. So pause for just a moment. Relax. That's a joke, okay? I'm not out there lighting up cigarettes on domestic flights. If that's a joke, why would I have told it? Because I need you to understand that almost every single joke you have ever heard follows this exact format. Every joke begins with a setup. Think about the setup for the joke I just told you. Anyone been on a flight? And then you'll develop an assumption about where I'm taking that story. And then that assumption will be shattered. Think about the moment in the joke where your assumption is shattered. It's the moment when the flight attendant comes back, says, pretend like it's the olden days, turns my call button off and walks away, and then punchline, so I lit up a cigarette. Every joke you've heard, that movie you love, that book you read, that song you cranked up in the car on the way over here today, I need you to understand that engagement is formulaic. So when I work with teachers, I'll tell you this, I get reluctant to even tell that banana story. I almost don't even tell it. You know why? Because everyone has the same response to the story of that incredible teacher. We all look at it and we're like, wow, that's amazing. And then what happens typically isn't spoken out loud, it's thought deep in the recesses of somebody's brain. They're like, wow, that's amazing. And then the thought that follows is, I would love to do stuff like that. Too bad I'm just not that creative. And people will absolve themselves of the responsibility for engagement by claiming they are not creative. Put eyes on me and hear me clearly. I need you to understand, creative people aren't doing things that nobody has ever done before. By and large, they are doing things that lots of people have done before. They're just doing it a little bit better or a little bit different, and they're all doing things that we can all do right now. And so I'll tell you this, I have spent the last 15 years trying to figure out what engaging teachers do differently. Because, I'll tell you this, I was a high school teacher for 15 years, and people tell us to be more engaging all the time. People say, hey, teachers should be more engaging. And then as teachers, we ask silly questions like, how? And people are like, oh, hell, I don't know how, but you should be more of that thing. So, all along, if we know that engagement is formulaic for a teacher, what's our free tags pyramid? What's our hero's journey? And I've spent the last 20 years studying engagement, trying to figure out what engaging teachers do differently, and here's what it is. I'll tell you this, here is the engagement formula for school. I call it the ATLAS model because ATLAS is just an acronym for what engaging teachers do differently. The first A stands for attention. What's the first A stand for? Attention. Amazing teachers walk in and they capture and hold student attention. You know what amazing teachers almost never do? They never walk in and say, good morning, class. Today we're going to insert boring thing here. You know why they don't start that way? Because it's terrible. Engaging teachers understand the power of those initial moments. And here's the good news. There's only 5 ways to capture and hold student attention. It begins with either an enrolling question, stories, videos, mnemonics, games, or challenges. That's it. That's all there is. The A stands for attention. The T stands for transition. Everybody, what's the T stand for? Masterful teachers are masters of the transitional phrase. This is a phrase that is typically repeated for emphasis. You heard the banana example. The teacher looked at this student and said, so you're telling me the order in which you do this matters. And she looked at her kids and said, so we can all agree order matters, because she wants her kids to remember what? Order matters. You have heard me say over and over and over, engagement is formulaic, because it's one of the most important things I want you to remember. Just so you know, masterful speakers have been using transitional phrases for a very long time. What gets repeated gets remembered. I have a dream. Does he say that phrase once or more than once in that speech? He says it 8 times. You know why he says it 8 times? Think about Winston Churchill's most famous speech. We will fight, we will fight, we will fight. You know how many times he says that in that speech? 8 times. What gets repeated gets remembered. The T stands for transition, and the L stands for lesson. Everyone all together, what's the L stand for? You're never going to coach the lecture out of our nation's classrooms. This is the direct, indirect instruction. But we have to recognize, our teachers have to recognize, like, hey, there's more than one way to give a lesson. It doesn't have to be a lecture. It can be a podcast. It can be a video. It can be a close read. But you're never going to get away from the fact that at some point there has to be a transfer of information and knowledge from one person to another. And then after we teach that lesson, the A stands for activity. Everyone all together, what's the A stand for? There has to be a doing thing. I'll tell you what, this is where things like instructional strategies come into play. This is where technology comes into play. Once we teach kids a lesson, the question we have to ask ourselves is like, hey, how are they going to get their heads and their hands around this content in ways that were never possible before? And then last but not least, the S stands for summation. What's the S stand for? Learning is sticky when it is tied to emotion. Learning is an inherently emotional experience. Think about your most memorable life experiences. There are moments when you felt joy, sadness, grief, happiness. And learning is an inherently emotional experience. And put eyes on me, my friends. The feeling kids feel when they walk into our classrooms cannot be boredom, and the feeling they feel when they walk out cannot be failure. If those are the two predominant emotions, they will forget everything that happens in between. My name is Weston. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day.